There we go. So this is a bit of an experiment on my vlog today. It's a bit of a wet and miserable day outside, and I've got nowhere extra exciting to go to without getting in the van, and I'm a bit trapped in where I am. Two cars are parked rather close to me, so I could get out, but it's a bit of a wiggle. So I'm just... Oh, wait a minute. Is that plugged in? Yeah, that's plugged in. I think we're all plugged in and okay. At least I hope so. It was a suggestion by Sean, actually. He said, why don't you just stick the camera on in the kitchen and just talk to us and see if people will be interested. So this is a little self-indulgent, I'm afraid. One of the things I need to do this morning is wash up. So I'm going to do that. You can see in my kitchen I've got my washing up, which I do. I've actually got some towels that need to go up, but I've taken those down purely because they would obscure the view. But yes, I do my washing up here in the kitchen, especially on a day like this with the SE on, although the SE is not yet lit, but it will be lit a little later on. And if it gets cold, although I understand we have got some sunshine this afternoon, which would be rather nice. So just doing a little bit of washing up, might even make a cup of coffee whilst I chat. I wanted to talk about trust. Who do we trust in this world? It's a very strange thing. I'm confused. When I was younger, everything seemed all right. Everything seemed to have a place. Policemen. You could trust a policeman. I was fearful of policemen, but you could trust them that they would be doing good work. We didn't have social media, so we only had the one news outlets, of course, which again, you sort of trusted the national or the British Broadcasting Corporation. You trusted them to give you the full story. Whether or not they ever did, I suppose, is a different argument, but you did trust them. You just had blind faith, or at least I did. Maybe there were people there who were questioning things, but it did seem to me that generally people trusted authority, organisations, the government. We used to trust the government would know what we were doing. We would vote in a party, and we may be let down by that party, and they never did what they ever said in their manifesto. They never actually got round to achieving education on a level that everybody would be happy with, or that the National Health Service would be able to provide everybody with everything that they desired, or that we would have enough budgets for the people who are out of work to keep them either going or to get them in work. But we sort of trusted that they were doing their best. But these days, everything seems to have turned on its head. I think it's been a slow process to do that. It definitely has been a bit of a slow process. But every year it seems to have accelerated, so that the trust that we have seems to be chipped away faster and faster and faster. And I'm not saying it's a deliberate thing. It may just be the way that the world has become. It may be something to do with the fast pace of what we call progression. Things that we knew yesterday to be true are being questioned, or we're being told that they're no longer true, that a man isn't a man, or a woman isn't just a woman anymore, that the history of this land wasn't essentially people from the Western Hemisphere, that actually sub-Saharan Africans had been around just as much as the Romans had been around. Books are being rewritten, and people like Cheddar Man, and what's the other one down there by the White Cliffs of, not Dover, but Eastbourne? Is it Eastbourne Woman? Or something like that, that these people were claimed now to be from sub-Saharan Africa, which seems incredibly unlikely that that's the case. And who do you trust? Museums are turning what the word is now woke, whatever that really means. Nobody really knows. There's so many different interpretations of these things. You can't trust the television anymore, and you can't trust social media. Everybody is polarized or atomized, and nobody, just looking to see if there's any more washing up, nobody can tell you, somewhere that you can grip onto and go, oh, okay, this is solid. This is solid. Our houses, the prices of houses have rocketed. I mean, I know they always were going up, but they seem to be going up extremely fast, that people cannot anymore get on to the property ladder. That when I was a lad, there was always that, this is what you do. You get a job, you leave school, you have some further education if that's the way you're inclined, but it wasn't important. You could get a trade and you would get a job and you would buy a house, you'd get married, or you'd get married and then buy a house, and you'd have children and you'd bring them up, your 2 to 3 children. And that was, that was life, the nuclear family, and everything seemed very fine. The father would sit there smoking his pipe and wearing his slippers, reading the newspaper, and the wife would be diligently bringing to the table a lovely meal. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that is the only way it was, but that's pretty much as one growing up in the 70s. I was born in the 60s, and growing up in the 70s, this is how still you understood what the world was going to be. And of course, previously, yes, changes came, but they were much slower. Now I've seen the changes rapid in the last 20 to 30 years. I just don't know what youngsters make of it. I guess youngsters are so used to change and things, technology coming in, everything disposable, because nothing really lasts, because nothing is made to last, because the technology will go. You start with a mobile phone that's the size of a brick, and then you can have it on a watch, and then it chops and changes, and suddenly 1 minute it's small again and it's a flip phone, or it's one with actual buttons on it that you can press, and then it's just a piece of what looks like glass, and it's all smooth and rounded and all very nice, and it's very small, and then it suddenly gets bigger again, and you don't quite know where you are. You don't quite know what to trust. This is what I'm trying to get at. It all seems very odd in this world. I haven't lit the Essie, so I'm actually having to use some electricity to boil the kettle. But in the evenings, it's very great because you can put the kettle on the Essie and it's nice and warm, and you keep it going with logs that I buy locally. I know I'm constantly talking about this. Putting the money back into the local economy, which I think is a good thing, instead of putting it into big corporations. So you don't really know where the money goes. Does it stay in this country? Does it go overseas? Is it paying for gas to help the Russians? I don't know. What is the war between Russia and Ukraine all about? I don't really know. Who are the bad guys? I mean, we're told the bad guys are Russia, and we sort of have a feeling that Russia ought to be the bad guys and that Ukraine are the good people. And of course, on the whole, that seems to be the right thing because they're fighting for their freedoms. But there's sort of murky clouds all around all of this. And and many times I just think, why are we even involved? I mean, it's tragic that anybody is bombing anybody else or destroying somebody's culture or all of that. But things go on in the world all the time where people are being war torn and we don't get involved. But we only seem to get involved where it's advantageous for us as a nation or as a Western civilization, which I don't know is necessarily the right, moralistically the right thing, because then we're having to pick and choose what people we help, which does seem a bit harsh, really. But you've got to help some, I suppose. So I'm going to make myself a coffee. If I can find the pot of coffee. So it's a very odd world I find myself standing in here in my late 50s, having been brought up in a world that I thought I understood, that I thought I knew where the future was going. And I think, when I think to my parents, whose upbringings were very different to mine, very strange, very different from each other. My mother was in an orphanage. I've spoken about that before. And she was brought up by nuns, and it was she was deposited there by her mother because they lived in a time where an unmarried mother with a child was not the done thing, and so she had to give up the child. She didn't. The father of my mother didn't stay around. We don't really know what happened to him or what happened to the relationship. He didn't stick around. And my father, this sounds ludicrous when I think about it now, my father, who was lived in Hendon when he was a child, from parents, my grandparents, they had a nanny. They had a nanny. I mean, he was brought up in the 30s, and I suppose that was a sort of thing that they did. I don't know that my grandparents were rich by any means, but it seems that they had a nanny for the children. Whether that was a Victorian... see, because my grandparents would have been, I suppose, let's say, born around the turn of the century. Their parents would have been Victorian, and they would have been just at the end of the Victorian era, which I think is quite a strange era, because then their influence from their parents, being very Victorian, would have been given to my grandparents, and some of that would have been part of their lifestyle, I suppose, in the 30s, and they must have had enough money to pay for a nanny. And then my father, of course, he didn't have any concept, which was interesting, on children and how to bring up children, which affected me as the child of my father. So that was a bit odd. And my mother, of course, had no concept of being a mother, because she didn't have a mother. She had an institution as her parents, and this mysterious lady that would visit her and take her out, which turned out to be her mother, but never told her until much later. And when she found out, my mother could not reconcile this woman being a mother who would put her child into an institution, and the terrible treatment that my mother had at the mercy of these nuns, who were, it seems to me, messengers from Satan. But things were different back then. Our sensibilities were very, very different. It's a very strange old world that we have. But anyway, so when I was brought up, I was aware that my upbringing had been a bit weird and influenced by, of course, all this different parent-child relationship down the centuries. And here I am today, a very strange and peculiar person, I'm sure, to other people watching it. But we're all in the same boat. We're all a mixture of how we've been brought up. And in a way, you would think that that would give us all a better understanding of one another, that we could all accept that people are different and they're not the same. But in life, it is handy having things to hang on to, those rocks in life, institutions, governments that you can trust, a police force that you can trust. You can ring up and say, I've been burgled, will you come and help me deal with it? I don't know what to do. Or an ambulance. I've slipped over and I've broken my back, or I've broken a leg, or I have something, or this person in my family, or this person in the street is in severe pain, potentially dying. Can you please come and help? And now it's yes, but it could be the next day, as I saw a report in the paper. the government in which chopping and changing leaders as if they are the sort of 2 or 3 buses coming late in the day, and not really knowing what they stand up for, saying one thing, doing another, having governments where there's no clear opposition anymore, that they all seem to be on the one side, and a side that you feel that you were brought up with, being proud of your country and proud of the things that you've done, and being a little nationalistic and sticking up for things and waving your flag because you see other nations doing that, and you're on an island surrounded by water, which makes you feel perhaps isolated from the world to a degree, but also proud of what your little island has managed to achieve, albeit that, of course, you've made mistakes and you've tried to put right those mistakes. And yet now I find myself in a world in which I'm the wrong gender, I'm the wrong colour, I'm the wrong age group, and I'm not represented at all in commercials on the television or on social media platforms. You're actually wiped out as if you don't even exist, and you're not even supposed to exist. You're not even supposed to have a view, and yet all the way through my upbringing I've not been somebody in the government. I've not tried to tell other people what to do. I used my social media platform to try and entertain, and yes, some of my philosophy has come out, and that's all very true, but now in this crazy mixed up world, it's just, you don't know who and what to trust. I used to be able to trust books, and of course I buy lots of second-hand books because modern books, I don't know if they're printing the truth. I seem to have a feeling that publishers in the past actually looked at the text and would say, well, you can't publish this and you can publish this, and is this correct or isn't it? Whereas now it's, well, will it make money? Seems to be the whole thing. Farming, one of the most important things in our life at the moment, I would say, for the human existence, is being challenged to the point that we have mass production of food. It's no longer local. You can no longer go and work for a farmer and be a labourer and be outside and trim hedges or dig ditches or grow things. You can't even get involved in any of that because it's all done by 1 or 2 hedge funders and company, you know, and I'm not using that as a joke, hedge funding. But it seems to be that there's big corporate now running the farms. There's a few local farms, but you know, they can't afford to pay you or employ you. And if you were employed, you'd have to use certain very large machines. And everything just seems to be very odd. The food is processed to the nth degree. It's not real anymore. We're being told that we can't have animals that we've had for hundreds of thousands of years. We can no longer, we've all got to eat bugs, which turns out in their exoskeleton, if that's the right word, has got toxic stuff which actually is not very good for us. Or that may not be true because you don't know who to trust anymore. Some people say, oh, they're very nutritious, and other people saying, well, hang on a minute. There is probably a reason why we don't eat bugs in significant numbers, because that's not actually, you know, if it was that easy, we'd be eating and manufacturing bugs. We would have had bug farms, which makes a lot of sense. You know, humans in the past, apart from at the moment now where we're in this very peculiar world, were very intelligent about survival. They knew how to survive because, well, we wouldn't be here now in this confused world if man hadn't survived and worked out ways to do it using terrible out of fashion things like hierarchies and farming techniques that these days seem to be very abhorrent, and this isn't what the modern world should look like. And yet I don't know whether I really want all of this and whether I really actually want that much quieter and simpler work where I am I know I just go out and dig a ditch, trim a hedge, grow some corn, come back and sit down by a real fire and eat a real piece of meat and some real locally grown vegetables, which have wildlife all around in the hedges and in the wildflowers. There's part of me that says, that's real. All of this, the rest of the world at the moment seems to be a huge charade in which we're being manipulated and told how to think and what to do and all of that. And I'm really not sure I want any of it, to be honest, which is why my kitchen looks the way it is, because I am rebelling against all this modern do-it-yourself electric, you keep getting emails, for example, for smart meters, so I can measure the amount of energy that I use. Well, I know how much energy. I turn the switches off when I'm not in a room. I turn appliances off when I'm not there. I turn my computer off. I turn the lights off when I'm not filming. I can work out roughly what it's all costing me. I don't need more digital spying to tell me how to run life. So who do you trust? This is the thing. I even now turn off the comments on my YouTube videos because it seems I can't even trust many of the viewers. Most of the viewers I do, of course, but there's some that spoil it for everybody else. And so in the end, you can't trust the audience, which is very sad, very sad. Anyway, this has been a bit of an experiment in the kitchen. I don't know I have no idea what it's coming out like because I'm just using the little GoPro on a shelf rather than go out and get soaked in the outside world. And at the end of the day, you don't even know if I'm real. You don't even know if I really exist. This could all be a mirage. Maybe I'm just made out of CG. After all, you're watching a screen too. This could be a complete bunkum. It isn't, but it potentially could be in the future. Anyway, there you go. That's my thing. Thank you for watching. If you did, I shall now make sure it's recorded and upload it to the ether and see what happens. See if anybody actually watches the nonsense that comes out of my head from time to time. Anyway, there we go. Thank you for watching.